Hello everyone, welcome back, and in this video lecture we are going to study about the functions of hypothalamus. And as we have done in the previous lectures, the anatomy of the nuclei of hypothalamus and their connections will help us to understand the functions of hypothalamus. So these are the following functions which are performed by hypothalamus. As we have already studied that hypothalamus is the integratory center in our brain, and it is also called as head ganglion for the autonomic system. It performs the autonomic function. It performs the endocrinal function, that is regulation of the secretion of certain hormones from the posterior pituitary and anterior pituitary, as we will see in details. Then regulation of sleep wake cycle, control of circadian rhythm, regulation of food intake, regulation of reproductive behaviors, role in emotional behaviors, role in regulation of body temperature, and role in regulation of water balance. So these are the list of various functions performed by hypothalamus. Let us see one by one how hypothalamus performs these functions. So first, coming to the autonomic function, there are certain areas or certain group of nuclei which are considered to be the sympathetic and parasympathetic control centers in the hypothalamus. So the posterior hypothalamus, the nucleus which are present posteriorly in the hypothalamus, as you can see here, these are the posterior nucleus of the hypothalamus. So posteriorly, these nucleus are the sympathetic center, as to say the sympathetic center of the autonomic function in the hypothalamus. And the anterior hypothalamus here, the anterior aspect of the hypothalamus and the nucleus which are present in the anterior hypothalamus can be considered as a parasympathetic center of autonomic function in the hypothalamus. So posteriorly lies the sympathetic and anteriorly lies the parasympathetic centers. So as we know, we have seen already in our previous lecture that hypothalamus, with the help of dorsal longitudinal fasciculus or with the help of posterior longitudinal fasciculus, it sends its efferents, or as to say output, to the midbrain, to the spinal cord, where to the midbrain, to the brainstem and to the spinal cord, where the autonomic nuclei which are present, which give rise to the nerve roots or autonomic outflows from the brainstem, like in case of vagus, in case of the parasympathetic system, the vagus is coming out from the brainstem, and in case of our sympathetic system, the thoracolumbar outflow is coming from the spinal cord. So hypothalamus, by sending its efferent to the nucleus, dorsal vagus nucleus in the brainstem and the intermediolateral horn in the spinal cord, so by stimulating them, the hypothalamus stimulates either the sympathetic or the parasympathetic function. So that is how hypothalamus, when it receives information from a wide area of the brain and then controls the sympathetic and parasympathetic balance in our body. So as we have already studied in our previous lecture about the autonomic nervous system in detail, there are certain examples which we will quote here, that is the cardiovascular regulation. That means, let us see here, the posterior hypothalamus is sympathetic or the sympathetic center. So in case of cardiovascular regulation, if we stimulate, or because of the stimulation of posterior hypothalamus, there will be stimulation of sympathetic outflow, and thus it will increase the heart rate, cardiac output, vascular vasoconstriction and other sympathetic effects. Whereas in case of cardiovascular regulation, when the anterior hypothalamus is stimulated, which is the parasympathetic center of autonomic nervous system in hypothalamus, so if the stimulation of anterior hypothalamus occurs, there will be a decrease in the heart rate because of the increased parasympathetic outflow to the heart, and maybe it can cause even vasodilation. So very rarely, because the vessels are supplied mainly by the sympathetic outflow, and vasoconstriction and vasodilation is completely a feature of sympathetic outflow. Increase in the sympathetic outflow causes vasoconstriction, decrease in the sympathetic outflow causes vasodilation. So that is how the anterior and posterior hypothalamus, which is the parasympathetic and sympathetic centers respectively, can control the cardiovascular regulation. If we look at another example like pupil size regulation, the stimulation of posterior hypothalamus, again look at it, it is a sympathetic center. So if we stimulate the posterior hypothalamus, it will cause pupillary dilation because it is a function of sympathetic nervous system. And if we stimulate the anterior hypothalamus, it will cause pupillary constriction, which is a function of parasympathetic outflow. So that is how the hypothalamus, anterior and posterior, are carrying out their respective functions by the stimulation of respective autonomic outflows. And in the last example, when we see GI tract, if we stimulate the posterior hypothalamus, what will happen? Because of the sympathetic outflow increase, there will be decrease in the motility of the GI tract, and there will be the decrease in the secretion of glands in the GI tract. Whereas when anterior hypothalamus is stimulated, the GI tract, in the GI tract there will be increase in the motility and there will be increase in the secretion. So that is how the hypothalamus is integrating and controlling the parasympathetic and sympathetic outflow, and these are the centers, respective center. Posterior hypothalamus is the sympathetic center and anterior hypothalamus is the parasympathetic center. Now coming to the endocrine functions. So as we know already, in the endocrinology we have studied that the hypothalamus controls the secretion of anterior pituitary hormones. So how does it controls the secretion of anterior pituitary hormones? From the tuberal nuclei, it sends its axon which ends on the capillary bed of the hypophyseal portal system. So when these are stimulated and they release their neurohormones, that is the stimulating hormones and the releasing hormones and the inhibitory hormones in the hypophyseal portal system, these then control the release of hormones from the anterior pituitary, that is the hormones like growth hormone, thyroid hormone, the hormones from the adrenal cortex, all those are regulated by the help of this hypothalamus tuberal nuclei, which is releasing or inhibiting hormone. When we look at the second point, that is the regulation of uterine contractility and regulation of the milk ejection, that is uterine contractility during parturition and milk ejection after the birth of the baby. This is regulated by the posterior part of the pituitary gland. What is happening here in that case is the supraoptic and the paraventricular nucleus, especially the paraventricular nucleus, is involved in the synthesis and release of oxytocin in the posterior pituitary. So whenever there is a appropriate stimulus, that is the stretch of cervix, there is release of oxytocin, which then further contracts the uterus by the positive feedback mechanism. Another thing what happens is milk ejection or milk let down reflex, which is also a function of oxytocin. So whenever the baby suckles, the stimulation in the nipple causes increased secretion of oxytocin from the posterior pituitary, and then it causes the milk let down, and that is called the milk let down reflex. So that is the endocrine function of the pituitary. And another posterior pituitary hormone, that is ADH or vasopressin, is also regulated by the supraoptic and the paraventricular nucleus. They both secrete the ADH or vasopressin hormone on the capillary bed of the posterior pituitary gland. So that is how the hypothalamus is regulating a vast variety of endocrine functions of the body. Now coming to the sleep-wake cycle, there are certain centers in our brain which acts as a sleep facilitatory center and which acts as a sleep or the waking centers, sleep inhibitory centers or waking centers. So anterior hypothalamus here is considered as sleep facilitatory center, and posterior hypothalamus acts as a waking center. What is the mechanism of sleep wake cycle here is the anterior hypothalamus, which is sleep facilitatory center, inhibits the posterior hypothalamus whenever the sleep has to occur. So in that case, posterior hypothalamus or the waking center is active all the time. When the sleep has to occur, the sleep center, that is the anterior hypothalamus, will inhibit the activity of waking center and thus causing sleep. So inhibition of wakefulness center in the posterior hypothalamus by the anterior hypothalamus, which is the sleep facilitator center, contributes to the occurrence of sleep. So that is the mechanism of how sleep occurs by the role of hypothalamus. There are various other factors involved in the maintenance or in the initiation and maintenance of sleep. So this is just a brief idea on how hypothalamus contributes to the sleep wake cycle. Then comes the control of circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is the physiological changes, the cyclical changes in the physiological functions of our body. It can include the secretion of certain hormones which are more in certain time of the day and less in other times of the day, and it also includes the sleep wake cycle and other physiological functions. So circadian rhythm is just a cyclical changes in the physiological function of our body. In human beings, this cyclical changes occur every 24 to 25 hours. It repeats for every 24 to 25 hours. And this circadian rhythm is internally driven. We would think that the light and the dark environment controls the circadian rhythm, but even in the absence of the light and dark cycle, as in the day and night, if a experimental animal is kept in the dark environment continuously, still he has the circadian cycle going on, because the centers which are controlling the circadian cycle are located internally inside the brain. The clues are provided externally which may benefit, and in the absence of the clues like light, darkness, still the circadian rhythm will go on because it is internally driven. The main nucleus of hypothalamus which is involved in the circadian rhythm is a group of suprachiasmatic nuclei. What is happening here is the light, when it falls on the retina, with the help of retinohypothalamic tract, it reaches to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. What we have studied in the last class is the afferent of retinohypothalamic tract to the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Now this suprachiasmatic nucleus inhibits the paraventricular nucleus. This paraventricular nucleus is as such an excitatory to the sympathetic outflow, intermediolateral horn outflow, and this stimulates the superior cervical ganglion, which stimulates the pineal gland. Now consider here that melatonin is the sleep initiating or the hormone which is secreted in the dark. Okay, so what happens when this is just a cycle with reference to the environmental cues. So when the light is present, the individual is exposed to the daylight, the suprachiasmatic nucleus starts its action and it inhibits this all process. What does it inhibits? It ultimately inhibits the secretion of melatonin from the pineal gland. Now when there is in the night time, when there is no light, what will happen? This inhibition of suprachiasmatic nucleus on the paraventricular nucleus will be lost, and then paraventricular nucleus will follow its normal course, which will stimulate the secretion of melatonin, which is responsible for the initiation of sleepiness and other cycles, which other physiological responses which occurs in the dark. So that is how alternation between the activity of suprachiasmatic nucleus and the activity of paraventricular nucleus. Ultimately, the pineal gland and the melatonin helps to maintain the circadian rhythm, but still, even if this external clues are not there, still the circadian rhythm can be maintained in an individual with certain variation, with a variation of hours, 1 to 2 hours. The last one which we are going to see today is the regulation of food intake. So, as about other centers in the hypothalamus, there are also the feeding center and the satiety center. So, the lateral hypothalamic nucleus, the lateral group of hypothalamic nucleus acts as the feeding center, and ventromedial nucleus of hypothalamus acts as a satiety center. So, just like how in case of autonomic or in case of sleep we have seen that one center is active all the time, one center is active all the time, and whenever the other center has to work, it inhibits the action of the first center which is active all the time. So in the case of regulation of food intakes, the same thing happens here also. Feeding center is active all the time, and the satiety center is the one, when it is active, it inhibits the feeding center. So this is the basic mechanism. Feeding center active all the time, which is present in the lateral hypothalamic nucleus, and there is satiety center which is present in the ventromedial nucleus, which inhibits the feeding center. Now there are certain theories responsible, there are certain theories which can explain the regulation of food intake. In this case, first is glucostatic theory. That means the satiety center is sensitive to glucose concentration in our blood, and when the glucose concentration is good, when it is maintained, what is going to happen is satiety center will be active and it will inhibit the feeding center. Whenever the glucose concentration falls down, the satiety center decreases its action and the feeding center comes out of inhibition and thus initiates the feeding, which then restores the glucose level. So that is the glucostatic theory. Now coming to the lipostatic theory. What does lipostatic theory tells us is, because of the presence of amino acids and fats in our blood and in our body, the leptin which is synthesized, which is secreted by the adipose tissue, keeps the feeding center inhibited. Okay, so the leptin is its mechanism of action, I will tell you in the next slide. But the leptin which is synthesized when there is adequate amount of adipose tissue in our body, they secrete leptin which inhibits the feeding center. Now coming to the gut peptide theory. That means gut peptide theory tells us that when the gut is full, when the GI tract is full, at that time when the GI tract there is presence of food, at that time certain GI hormones are released, like cholecystokinin, especially cholecystokinin, and because of that cholecystokinin, there are cholecystokinin A and cholecystokinin B receptors in the hypothalamus, and because of that, what happens, that those are the one which inhibits the feeding center. So that is how cholecystokinin and other gut hormones can also inhibit the feeding center. Thermostatic theory tells that whenever there is a constant decrease in the body temperature, it stimulates the feeding center, and if there is increase in the body temperature, it inhibits the feeding center. So increase in body temperature inhibiting feeding center, decrease in the body temperature as in cold environment, it increases the feeding center. There are certain neurotransmitters and hypothalamic peptides which are also responsible, like stimulation of alpha adrenergic receptors and centrally acting opioids increases the food intake, whereas the beta adrenergic and dopaminergic and serotonergic receptors decreases the food intake. In the case of hypothalamic peptides, neuropeptide Y, orexin A, orexin B, melanin concentrating hormone and ghrelin, all of them when they are released, they increase the food intake. Whereas alpha MSH, CART, that is cocaine and amphetamine regulated transcript, and corticotrophin releasing hormone are the one which decrease the feeding center, inhibits the feeding center. When I was talking about leptin, leptin inhibits the release of neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y stimulates feeding, but leptin stimulates the secretion of neuropeptide Y, thus decrease the activity of feeding center and thus decreases the feeding behavior in the normal individual. So this is about half of the functions of hypothalamus. Next half we'll be doing it in the next class. Thank you so much.